By now, I'm sure you're all sick of hearing about this cooperation. How many dark secrets can this place possibly have? You ask as you roll your eyes. Please bear in mind though, just how large this company has become and how long it's been around. This company likely has its tendrils wrapped all around your childhood. I remember growing up watching so many of their movies, practically raised by them when my mother didn't want to bother with me and would just plop me in front of the TV. I'd sit for hours watching animated lions teach me lessons. Watching a mouse whistling show tunes on a boat, these memories infected my mind. My love for Disney and its creations started young. I would sit in class trying to redraw my favorite characters. What started as disastrous scribbles on lined paper turned into refined art on an easel as the years passed by. As those years passed, I watched the animation in the movies I was growing up with increase in quality, and before long, my dream to be a part of the team making the movies that could shape childhoods began. Now I wasn't ignorant to the darker side of Disney, the controversies that surround the company that was slowly absorbing whatever properties it saw as financially beneficial, all the secret messages found in movies, or the more nefarious people that worked there. I wanted to be a positive cog in that machine though, to be given an opportunity to teach a kid halfway across the globe about friendship. Through a lot of hard work, college experience, and the connections that one of my professors had, I was able to apply for a position at Disney. The process was admittedly pretty nerve-wracking, but I had a solid portfolio of art pieces. There were drawings that I had made with Disney's animation style in mind, and some with my artistic voice. They liked that I was showing reference to Disney without trying to pander to them. It all took some time, but eventually I was walking into my first day as a Disney employee, and needless to say, I was excited. And yes, I had to sign an NDA, several actually, all of which I'm going to be breaking to tell you this story, but I'll cross those repercussions when they get to me. When I first started there, as you'd expect, I was doing a lot of the grunt work. Sometimes it felt like I spent more time behind a broom than I did in front of a computer or with a piece of paper. Over time though, I started being trusted with more and more opportunities, cleaning up unfinished drawings or offering my input on cells, that kind of stuff, and the more of it I did, the responsibility I was being given. I was always under someone's supervision, but I was able to start animating, which was like a dream come true. I worked as hard as I could, making sure my quality of work continued to improve as I pushed myself to be better all the time. Over the years, this helped me rise through the ranks and gain a lot of trust when it came to working on the products that the company put out to the public. When you stand to earn money like Disney does, you try to keep mistakes out of your properties. After a while, I was assigned to work on preparing a movie for a re-release, which meant for a short time it was coming out of the vault. We were supposed to go in and tinker with any frames that looked off and try to modernize the animation quality. It was going to be marketed as an HD release, so they wanted it to look as clean as possible. It was a small team of people that I was a part of that got access to the vault, so to speak, which is a lot less magical than it sounds. We were given hard drives in a separate room with powerful computers. The hard drives were the vaults, so to speak. Before I even began working on the project, I was forced to sign legal document after legal document. It made sense. I was being given basically the entire Disney catalog in their files. Some of the things I had to sign made it sound like some mafia boss was going to track me down if I divulged information. I'm hoping that's not the case. Regardless, we started getting to work. We pulled the necessary files and would go through frame by frame, making everything smoother and more digital. It was tiring work as each frame had to be meticulously looked over and submitted. If it was rejected, we'd have to redo it. So I was typically in the office pretty late and would plug overtime whenever I could. I had bills to pay after all. My co-workers, though, not so much. They would always be out of their chair when the clock told them it was time to leave, so I was alone in my particular area often. It took me a while to notice that was even happening as I was so focused on what I was doing. Well, one night while working on an incredibly detailed section of frames, a lot of city spaces and movements, my eyes started to hurt from the strain. I decided to give my eyes a moment to rest after submitting a frame. If it wasn't up to par, it would be rejected the next day as no lead animators were in at the time, so I leaned back in my chair and looked around at the dark, empty office. Rubbing my eyes, I peered up at the soft red light on the security camera in the room, pretty sure it was there to make sure one of us didn't take the hard drive and run. But my computer was positioned in such a way that the camera wasn't able to see my computer's screen. Looking back at my screen, I accessed the hard drive to get to the next frame I needed to work on when I felt a ping of curiosity. I had the entire Disney catalog at my fingertips. I figured I was resting my eyes anyways. If I got caught, I could say I opened the wrong file or that I was just looking for a reference. I figured that no real harm could come of it anyways. It was just movies people already knew about, right? Well, not so much. You see, as I flipped through the various folders, I saw everything. Sure, there were a lot of movies from my past, and it was cool to look at all the digital cells and such. There were also more sensitive movies, ones that don't hold up in this social climate, stuff like Song of the South, or movies with similar issues. Then there were the products that were either never finished or never put out, and some of them were just different than what I could have ever expected. There were so many files it felt like the archive was unending. There were videos either half finished or done about some of the other stories you might have heard about Disney, a graphic depiction of Mickey pulling his head off or Mickey walking down the street like the story about the cursed AVI. Initially, I thought these were pretty funny. Some of them got pretty gory, but I thought it might just be the animators having fun with the internet stories. All of those types of files though had attached documents that doxed the individuals that came up with the stories, their address and family members all in a line of text, which just created a sinking feeling in my stomach. It was as if those people that created rumors or fictional stories were being monitored. There was a series of short films in a collection titled All Chopped Up. The series included some old-fashioned animation of the various mainstay Disney characters in various stages of decomposition. A lot of work was put into these cells. Each frame was titled as if they represented a quick passing of time. 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. The process of decay was so finely detailed that it was nauseating. Furthermore, each character seemed to have a different cause of death that affected their process of decay. Pluto's skin was bloated and sore like he had been drowned. Donald had been hacked to pieces and the edge of his skin decayed more quickly. I couldn't possibly imagine the functional use of such cells. Looking at just how much detail there was, someone had to have worked hours upon hours to accomplish the effect. I didn't go through all of them, but those files went on for a while and even began to include names of more modern events. Before I clicked off that folder, I watched one more. This time it looked like Goofy had been stretched to a cartoonish degree, his skin pulled to the point it was tearing, blood acting as a trail of sugar causing bugs to swarm him. It nearly made me sick, but as the video ended, I saw a quick slate that read, Reference 338. It was only there for a frame. That was enough of that folder though. I clicked off when I scrolled down to see that the names of the videos were involving more modern characters. I needed a moment for my stomach to settle back down, so I just scrolled around looking at various file names until one caught my eye. The title was simple enough to spark intrigue. WW. Clicking on the file, once again I was greeted with an assortment of video files. Each file was titled with names of countries, military powers, and alliances. Clicking on these played movies with similar animation to the era of Cinderella. Each video depicted, once again, various Disney characters, but this time they were engaging in wartime activities. Cartoon bombs with cheerful expressions dropped out of signing planes, landing on strips of land that also had faces, shock and terror, screaming out as the bombs landed. All the states and countries were labeled. There was a scene of characters with rifles shooting bullets across a field. The bullets would act like flies buzzing around, until they would eventually find their target landing in the side of a soldier's skull, dropping them to the side. The characters celebrated their win by dancing over the dead bodies of the fallen enemies, waving a flag, which in this particular video represented Japan. The more I looked, the more it became clear what I was seeing. As I saw Mickey Mouse cartoonists dressed up as a German, I would have laughed if he was cutting the throats of tied-up forces. Each video depicted an army backed by Disney characters defeating an opposing army with ease. It was propaganda, military propaganda. Disney was ready to take any side in any war that they saw fit. Whether they were looking to be on the winning side or make financial gain from the affair, they were ready to drop a video at a moment's notice. I looked up the dates these films were made, all of them after 1945. Shortly after World War II ended, they got to work on these videos. I had noticed I was already looking at these files for far too long, and there were still so many to shift through, but I figured if I was sitting there that long and hadn't submitted any frames, then the higher-ups might get suspicious and shut me down, so I quickly switched over to work on the re-release cells. I got 2 of them down quicker than I ever had. I submitted them knowing they would be rejected, but I needed to make it look like I was busy. There was such a sinking feeling in my chest about what might happen if they found out what I was doing. Maybe they knew I would peek, that just the act of looking at their files would scare me into silence, not to mention all the NDAs that likely signed my life over to them. A few hours after I was supposed to have left, I finally turned off my computer and went home. Getting to sleep was rough. Normally I was so mentally drained I could flop into bed and just wait for slumber to grasp me. That night though, I was constricted by the thoughts and images of what I had seen, not to mention mentally reread file names trying to figure out if I had missed any of note, deciding I would try again the next day, owing only to some sick fascination, like when something hurts but you do it again. Like licking batteries when you were younger, I think other people did that. The next day I was obviously fairly tired. I downed 1 cup of coffee after another to try and perk up, try not to show my fatigue. As I walked into the room where I worked, I saw a post-it note on my desk. My heart sinking when I read that one of the lead animators wanted me to see him. I had been there a few years and I hardly ever directly spoke with those above me. Nervously I stepped into his office, awaiting whatever may come. I was surprised when he admired me for the extra work I was always putting in, going so far as to offer me a raise. He said he hoped to continue to see such effort from me and that the work I had submitted last night was exceptional. I was happy for a moment when he mentioned that he liked the work I did though. I got worried. He knew the last 2 cells I submitted were off. They were shoddy work I barely tried on. He knew that I knew that. I felt a warmth run up my spine. Excusing myself, I rushed out of the room citing. I was excited to get back to work and made my way to the computer. It was a drag, waiting for the others to leave. I didn't want to risk asking if they had peeked at any of the files. I didn't want to open any dialogue with them. Still, I worked diligently and communicated with my team. I planned to concentrate harder and get through more cells than I had the previous day, but save a few I could submit periodically after my co-workers left. As the hours ticked on, I anxiously worked away, putting my best foot forward and barely breaking to take a sip of water. When my shift ended, most of my co-workers got up and left, except for one. I kept looking over at him, hoping he'd leave. He expressed that he just had a cell to finish up and was also gone within a few minutes. There I was again, alone in my little isolated workspace. I opened a few tabs, getting my cells ready to submit with a press of the send button. I had 3 perfect fixes ready to submit that looked like I worked hours on. Before long, I was searching through the vault once more. I came across a folder named Alternate. It's no surprise that there's a decent amount of death in Disney films. Parents seldom make it past the 10-minute mark. Not to mention a lot of Disney pulls inspiration from old fairy tales that are typically more brutal than their on-screen adaptation. Alternate consisted of the less kid-friendly scenes in movies. Remember when we're here Bambi's mother gets shot off-screen? Well, there were cells that showed the bullet piercing her flesh. For far too long she struggles to stand and trot in Bambi's direction, desperately calling for Bambi to keep running. She pulls her increasingly limp body, painting a red streak in the snow, and I was able to watch as life left her eyes. Same thing with one of my favorites, Lion King. I never wanted to see Mufasa get brutalized like that. to see the hooves clacking against his skull, pressing into his stomach and breaking his rib cage, his stomach rising and falling until it failed to rise again. I got out of those files quickly. The company was already becoming so tainted. I didn't want to ruin the good memories I had. There was a file named Employee that contained a file on each of the workers containing their information and even a cartoon drawing of them. In any other scenario, it would be cute, but I had my doubts that anyone was aware of these files. The most alarming part was my little cartoon character, smiling and happy, was standing in front of an apartment building. Even though it was a cartoon, I recognized the building all too well. I didn't want to look at anyone else's file and invade their privacy, so I back out of there too. Switching over, I sent in a file to submit. No, it wouldn't be looked at till the next day. I returned to the files. My finger hovered over the mouse button for a while. A folder titled RW References. There had been so much bizarre horror that I questioned if I should even click further. Maybe though, if I found one folder that contained nothing special, just spare cells that no one found a use for, or something innocent, I could log off for the night and feel even slightly better about myself and who I was working for. Before clicking into the folder, I made sure to send another cell in, planning to send my last one before I left. My finger fell like a hammer onto the mouse, pressing firmly on plastic. The folder opened. I was relieved to see the contents. Black and white photos of people standing in front of a wall, doing silly poses. RW must have stood for real world. I even laughed a little bit looking through these photos of people standing around laughing. They made funny faces and used props to set scenes. I figured that these were stills taken and used to assist animators to draw certain scenes and actions. I shuffled through the pictures, looking at each of them, washing the previous oddities and horror from my mind, until I noticed the file names. Reference 001/ reference 002. It continued counting up in the structure. Moving my mouse up, I clicked on the search bar and type a number in. I thought it was impossible, a long shot. I had to know though. I had to feel that light shock of electricity running on the tip of my tongue. With reference 338 typed into the search bar, I pressed enter. Seconds later, the directory moved to the picture with the same name, and I clicked on it. I would have thrown my seat back or fallen out of it if I didn't feel the pressure of observation. Just as was depicted with Goofy, a woman was in the frame. She was laying on the ground with her legs sprawled out. There were hooks in her. Hooks that were pulling at the edges of her, stretching her skin out. Even though it was black and white, I could see the dark clouds of blood pouring out from the points of puncture. She looked up at the ceiling and I could see the same lifeless eyes I saw on Bambi's mother earlier, so empty. The blood that was spilling onto the floor had small white beads in it that I could only assume were maggots, judging by what happened to Goofy. I should have stopped there certainly, and I can't imagine for the life of me why I kept going, why I kept clicking on reference folders. It was so disturbing how so many were of happy and smiling people messing around, and suddenly a grisly scene would load up. One moment some girl is dressed in sailing attire smoking a pipe. The next, a body is pinned to the wall with dozens of screws reaching towards the camera, still clearly alive. Dismemberment, torture, and so many other vile acts were found in those reference photos, and I had just about enough. I could take the gore anymore. It all looked far too realized. There was no way I was seeing props or mannequins. I could tell by the way some of their mouths were open, screaming, begging for it to end. Those people lost their lives for the references, so some animator could make a sick cartoon that no one would ever see except the people with access to the vault. My decision to quit was made there and then. I didn't know how to get out of it, but I was resolved to have nothing to do with the company. You know there are children in Disney films, right? Smaller bodies, God forbid a fully grown body could just scale down for a child's reference. No, they had to use children too. It's just horrible. I can't put it into words. I've tried to here, but I can't appropriately describe the sheer lifelessness this company has. I submitted my final frame, a princess smiling at the camera. She looks so happy, but the vision is tainted for me. The happy smile has become sinister, something dark lurking behind every pearly white set they sell us. Then, as I was turning my computer off, I heard a notification. My submission had been accepted. The email came with an attachment, a picture. Nervously, I opened it. It was a picture from the security camera in the room. Before it even had time to fully load, I was out of my seat and bolting from the room. How could I have been so stupid and careless? How did I not think of the window that was behind my workspace? The blinds were always drawn so no one could see in, and the camera was positioned so it would see the back of my computer. But I didn't once consider the reflection of my monitor on the window displaying what I was looking at. They could see me and they wanted me to know they saw. They saw every little file my prying eyes looked at. I left. It's been about a week now, and I haven't gone back or even gotten a phone call from anyone I worked with. I've just been sitting in my room anxiously awaiting a fallout. I can only picture those files now. When I try to sleep, they swim to the surface. When I try to eat, they churn my stomach. I know how far-fetched this all sounds, but remember what Disney is. They are such a profoundly large company, making more money than I could fathom off of everything they touch. They create countless jobs and fund much more than we know about. The CEO could murder people in broad daylight and still have the funds to get away with it. There are so many people with so much power and money in that company, people disillusioned with the world around them, unfamiliar with the value of life and what it means to take on. The company no doubt does good. They teach positive lessons to children that need them and provide entertainment for all ages. I hope sincerely that the things I saw in those files never make it out of the Disney vault.